This video is a recording of a live event, about an hour and 15-minute webinar. It's really packed with all sorts of energy healings and information and explorations into the fine abstract layers of creation. I hope you love it. If you do, please like and subscribe. Owning the keys to fulfillment. It's a very exciting topic, actually, kind of related to manifestation to a certain degree. And I've got a lot of really wonderful, exciting areas that I'm looking forward to exploring with everybody. So what we'll do is we'll start with, I'll give a brief description for the new people of what is energy healing. And then we'll go into 3 minutes of silence and I'll explain why. And then when we come out, I'll do a little prayer of gratitude in order to kind of initiate the process. And then we'll dive into tonight's topic. Okay, thanks everyone for being with me. It's really exciting to be here. And I've been looking forward to being with all of you so much because this topic is really interesting and it deserves a big light shown on it. So with our big healing collective and all of us present, we're able to provide a quality and a level of light, of awareness that isn't available in other contexts. Anyway, so that's why I'm so grateful to see everybody. All right, let's do this. What is energy healing? Energy healing is the process of focusing attention in an intelligent and intentional manner. And attention is being. It is consciousness. It is awareness. So attention activates anything upon which it falls. And it activates or awakens source energy. It activates or awakens being, divine being, that quality of consciousness, which is at the foundation of literally everything that exists, wholeness. When the body falls ill, we fall into some state of separation from wholeness. Some part of the body doesn't feel integrated, it doesn't feel connected. And when we put the attention on, specifically with that connection to the source of creation, the result is that this part of the body that was feeling separated and uncertain about its future and how things are going to go, this part of the body or the life, whether it's your finances or your relationships or whatever, this area of life is infused with the aspects that it's been missing. Basically, completion occurs, wholeness is established. And when wholeness is established on the level of consciousness, then wholeness can express itself in the material level of the physiology. So there's a process that takes place. And what we do in these live webinars is we go together. Oh, thanks, you sweetheart. Thanks for hands raising. We go step by step together through this process in order to understand it really intimately. And we do it in the context of our big, beautiful, luscious healing collective, which gives all, it's like having engines behind the process. And so it's really like activating in a way that if one is by oneself doing is not the same dynamic. And that's okay. I mean, all the dynamics are good, right? But the live webinars, this format has been something really wonderful and really special. It has been, it is, it shall be. And I am so grateful. All right, so now I'm going to, since I got here just a couple minutes late, I'm going to change the shape of my window just a little bit. There we go, so I can see you. Okay, good. All right, so why do we start the live webinars with 3 minutes of silence? Because the source of creation is a fundamental player in the process of creating wholeness. The source of creation is wholeness. And in energy healing, we're connecting in with that wholeness and we're drawing more and more of that wholeness or that totality, that complete Brahman. We're bringing it through the windows of perception to the field of expression. And so it's very nice to start by going home, coming back to the source, coming back to the foundation. All right. So I'm going to say, let's close our eyes, and we'll have about 3 minutes of silence, and then I'll indicate to open the eyes, and please take a minute or two, because when we go into this silence together, it's deep and it's amazing, and we want the nervous system to have the opportunity to come out gracefully. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's slowly open the eyes. Take a minute. Thank you to the source of creation for being all of us together, for the ancestors of each person participating in person live and in the future, for through the recording, It is by virtue of the ancestors that we have the body vehicle. So big thank you for that. Thank you to the eternal tradition of wisdom, which is a kind of knowledge bridge that connects the unmanifest source of creation with the entire manifest field of creation. Thank you for our ability to work concisely and efficiently today. We like to go to the seed or source of imbalances and problems and address that in the highest and best possible way. And as we do that together, that action step, we take that action, have that direct experience, we're also integrating the principles and the mechanics and the technology of energy healing as a tool for each person who's participating here, so that this technology can become more and more accessible and useful, and our skills increase. May our session today meet and exceed everyone's desires for the incredible work that we can accomplish together as a great, huge, beautiful healing collective. And I sincerely thank everyone for being with me. It is such a privilege and it is such a joy to be the voice of our collective. So thank you all for being with me. I am very happy to be here. I would also like to say thank you to everyone for that amazing moment of silence. I enjoyed it so much. And what I noticed, we are getting better. We are getting better as we're getting smarter as a healing collective. And so what I noticed partway through the silence, maybe at about 1.25 minutes or something, was I saw orderliness. I saw order in our collective. It's like we had kind of organized ourselves into some kind of a matrix or some kind of the relationships between everybody in this healing collective had organized themselves in such a way, oh look, in such a way as to allow the silence to go deeper than it has ever gone before. So as soon as I noticed the orderliness, I noticed this deep, it was like we were under deep sea divers or spelunkers or something. And we were diving so deep into the fabric of the silence of being like never before. It was amazing. And of course, the first thing that I noticed when that happened was the silence loves it. It loves it. The silence, totality, wholeness feels recognized. It feels understood. It feels appreciated. So that was really beautiful. But what was also really fascinating to me is that at the end, when I asked everyone to open the eyes and the awareness started coming out into the field of the relative, I noticed patterns of orderliness. It kind of like a little bit sort of reminded me of like the lace on my shirt or the patterns of the jewelry. Like there was this quality of aesthetically beautiful but orderly patterning of consciousness that was going from the causal level into the field of life, into the web of life. And it was affecting these threads of consciousness that exist at the astral level or the web of life level of the field, the energy field. And it was beautiful, like really, really beautiful. And I thought to myself, this is the foundation of fulfillment. Like this is how fulfillment rises from the source of creation into the field of expression. It rises in these waves of orderliness that are not just efficient in giving, in embodying wholeness at grosser and denser and like more concrete levels, but also exquisitely beautiful and efficient and natural, like integrated with nature. It was really amazing. So that was super beautiful. Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to share that. Okay, so good questions came in, which I hope to get to this time. We'll see. And also, I have some notes and took a deep dive with one of my dearest people that I bounce things off of, my son, one of my sons. And I have some notes to share. So I thought we would start in right away with covering the details or the specifics of this topic. When I was thinking about this topic, I knew and have been aware for a long time that with energy healing, we're using awareness. So when I talk about the keys to fulfillment, this webinar is called Owning the Keys to Fulfillment. When I talk about that, I'm not, there are a lot of areas that we could cover, right? We could talk about, like having a healthy diet and routine. We could talk about like principles of health, for example, or principles of business, if we're thinking about fulfillment on a monetary level, or principles of relationships, or even spirituality. But in this webinar, I wanted to explore with all of you some of the very delicate ways in which we focus our attention. Because energy healing is about focusing attention. And I trust every one of you will take the actions and integrate this information in a way that is fulfilling to each one of you. And that's going to look a little different for each person in this session. So it's not about on the surface what's fulfilling so much, because I'm going to let each of you decide from your side what's fulfilling, but more about the underlying principles that allow us to really concretely structure fulfillment. So I was thinking, okay, we need keys, like specific keys. And I found 3 keys that make a lot of sense to me. And I want to add that when I originally wrote this description of this webinar up, I was thinking of keys that are universal, ancient, that have been with us all this time, but we haven't had the opportunity to explore them in our collective. So anyway, the first one is a really obvious one that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but that is access to the source of creation. That's the first key. Access to the source of creation. And I know for most of the people in this energy healing webinar, that's pretty much old hat. Many of the people here, many of you are here because you have decades, years or decades of the direct experience of the source of creation under your belt. And so you understand you don't need me to describe and explain why that's important. And for those who are new to the idea, I would just like to briefly reference the point that I made before when we were going into the silence just now. So you already understand how accessing the source of creation is important. It's a resource. It's a resource of energy, intelligence, creativity, and it is accessible within the field of consciousness. It is accessible through consciousness. It is also accessible through each of the senses of perception. It's accessible through the mind. It's accessible through the intellect. It literally is ego in its purest form, and not to confuse with New Age, or I would say maybe non-dualist definitions of ego. Any non-dualists out in the audience there can help me out with that. But I'm using the word ego in a little bit unique way, which means sense of self. Sense of self. We are all yoked to the source of creation. We are all expressions of the source of creation. There is no part of any of us, there is no bit of anything that we could possibly define that isn't made of that. So access to the transcendent, I have written there, access to the transcendent or divine being, source of creation, that's the first point. It's the first step. There are many ways. On my website, if you go to the knowledge base and look up the 112-point matrix, if you search alphabetically, it'll be the first entry there. And that kind of gives an overview and description of the mechanics of how that happens. In these energy healing webinars, we are literally leveraging mind and intellect as the vehicles for experiencing the transcendent or the source of creation directly. We're going through the channels of logic and understanding and reason and feeling to reach that. It had to be mentioned because it is a significant key and it is universal and ancient, and we can't have a webinar like this without mentioning it. So I did. But moving on. And if you have questions about that, just shoot them in here and we can go into more detail if you want. But the next point was origins of attention. Beautiful. Origins of attention. So the second key to fulfillment is origins of attention. What I mean by that is that the human nervous system is flexible enough to accommodate the positioning of perception in various places. We can position our perspective, our point of access to our world along various spectrums. We can position it along this, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past too, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this one either. The meat of today's session, the juicy part of today's session will be on the third point. But just to give us, this is still important though. This is very important. And this is, I would say, kind of like an advanced technology of consciousness that probably was reserved for sort of a specific subset of our world, that until the nervous system becomes sufficiently integrated, and that means until consciousness raises to a certain point and the nervous system supports that higher consciousness, intentional control over the point of perspective can be, I would say, maybe feeling inaccessible to some people, may feel inaccessible. But for you guys, it's not accessible. Just the fact that you're here means that you're ready for this knowledge and you're ready for this experience. So I have no doubts and I have no problems bringing it out in its fullest. We can, as we've talked about in the past, position awareness, the point of perspective, along the spectrum of ego, right? Because humans have this innate ability to be empathetic and to be able to see through the physiology of the universe. We can see through our own personal physiology, and we can see through the physiologies of others, and we can see through the physiology of the trees or the sunlight or a piece of glass, a camera. Awareness is flexible. It is the most flexible material in creation. It moves faster than the speed of light. It transcends space and time. Awareness can move through anything. It doesn't matter how solid. It can move through a black hole. It can move through anything. So awareness or attention, consciousness, has qualities that make it infinitely flexible. And as we use our consciousness or attention in ways by putting it in places where we wouldn't normally put it in places that are new and interesting and exciting and stretch the potential of consciousness. As we do that, the nervous system accommodates. And when the nervous system accommodates, we integrate that experience. That's one reason why we started with the source of creation. So much of the awareness is going out toward this world. And when we turn it around, that's the first step, is we turn around and we send it back into the source. And that causes a shift in the refinement and the flexibility of the nervous system. Then the nervous system, it becomes more refined, more flexible, stronger, more integrated, and then we can accommodate, putting it in places that are, putting our awareness or attention in places that provide deep, or I could say profound, appreciation and understanding of reality. Everybody in this healing session appears to be receiving a very, very refined, very powerful light medicine specific for the nervous system. It is being administered by the Devic intelligence. That means by the body's fundamental intelligence. It is soft. It is soothing. It is full of grace. It is activating a flexibility in the nervous system that allows each one of us to navigate through more and more intense emotional experiences and yet maintain evenness. This is what this light medicine is doing in the nervous system. It's supporting connection with wholeness along an emotional spectrum, along a spectrum of feeling that goes from like across the various extremes of complementary pairs of opposites of emotions. So it's definitely affecting the neural network of the heart as well as the brain. Also, I'm seeing central spinal column is affected. The extended nervous system as it goes out into the extremities of the body. It's very interesting. This integration of stability in the nervous system in the wake of the tidal waves of feeling and emotion that we are faced with on a regular basis, and sometimes only faced with in unusual and difficult circumstances, it's having an effect on the heart, especially, and I'm thinking like the actual physical heart. You know, it started out, the healing started out in the heart energy center, but it's going actually to the heart and the circulatory system, and it's promoting a flow of bliss in the circulatory system. How can we stay steady in the tidal waves of bliss if we can't stay steady in the opposite of that? So we have to be able to stay steady in all of it. But I think it's your intelligence, your creativity, your brilliance, our brilliance as a collective that immediately went from the stability in the nervous system to the bliss. Like, oh, I can be stable under any circumstances. Well, shall I be stable under the best of circumstances? Beautiful. You're beautiful. See how beautiful. See how beautiful. Bliss includes, it's not that sort of what sometimes people think of as kind of like ignorant bliss. No, it's a mixture of very, very sweet impulses of intelligence, includes compassion and a kind of a pure, intelligent energy, like an energy of like pure knowingness or pure intelligence. Feels like this, I'm using the word bliss, but it really represents something bigger than what we normally think of when we think of bliss. It's a vehicle for drawing that deep, deep transcendental silence that we accessed at the beginning of this session up through the nervous system and up into all the parts of the body. Because the nervous system, it's kind of a systemic system, right? It touches, except it doesn't go into your hair. But I think my hair is enough bliss. So there's enough bliss in the hair. But it goes into the, connections of the hair to the head, everywhere, 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 everywhere. So that is really that incredibly profound, beautiful, deep, luscious silence of being that is able to flow through our bodies in a way that it wasn't able to flow before this healing moment, before this time of healing. So congratulations, everybody. All right, where was I? Oh yeah, origins of attention, points of perspective. So we know that we can focus our point of perception, our point of perspective, anywhere like along the scale of density, right? From very physical material down to finer, more abstract, and then into the source of creation level of being. And so that's another spectrum across which points of perspective can be isolated or located. They are not actually separate or different from the points of perspective along the spectrum of ego, because the spectrum of ego goes from a very kind of dense, like just through my body, through my senses in this body, to through the entire collective field of creation. The nervous system is so flexible, it can go through the entire universe at the same time. Like that's something the human nervous system can do. We can perceive the whole universe at once. You can. And when you do, it no longer separates you from any other living thing. Then we are connected to all other living forms. And we are connected through our common anchor to being. The part about this that I wanted to explore with you guys today, because everything I've said is old stuff. You've already heard all that stuff. That's just boring old stuff. The point that I wanted to look at is in relationship to fulfillment. And like, how do we know which point of perception to select in order to promote an experience of fulfillment. Like, how can we shift? Everybody's life has some good things and some bad things. So we need to actually, in order to understand this, we need to analyze a little bit what is fulfillment. We have to look at fulfillment a little bit. So fulfillment is embodied completely in the source field, embodied completely by divine being. And I think we're starting to transition into the third point, which is pure potential, pure potential. And this is the part that I haven't explored. I mean, I explored on my own a lot, but I was looking forward to exploring with you, because together new knowledge arises. Together we go into places we've never gone, I've never gone before. And I love doing it with you. It's so much fun. It's exciting. All right. So for years, I have a little story that goes with it. So for years, I was accustomed to having a certain amount of what we here in the TM movement is defined as supportive nature. And we can sort of equate more supportive nature with more fulfillment in life, because supportive nature is that type of supportive nature means that the laws of the universe are kind of like backing you up. So for example, you think to yourself, oh, I really need to talk to my friend. And then right when you think that, the phone rings and it's your friend, or they come to the door or something, or you bump into them somewhere. You're thinking it, but you're at the grocery store, and then there they are at the grocery store, something like that. These types of experiences where your needs and desires are fulfilled, sometimes even before you realize that you have the need or desire, right? Somebody brings you something and you're like, oh, I needed that, right? So this is supportive nature. And it's a pretty good metaphor, or it's a pretty good way to at least begin to define what is fulfillment in life, right? Because these are the keys to fulfillment. So one of the ways we can define fulfillment is supportive nature. When desires are fulfilled even before the intention to fulfill. There's another way to define fulfillment, and that is less suffering. When there's less suffering, right? So looking for a minute at what's the difference between suffering and fulfillment. And that is that my understanding of the way this works is that the universe is evolving, and as long as we're aligned with that evolution, then the evolution of the universe helps our evolution, and our evolution helps the evolution of the universe. And together, from both a collective and an individual level, there's a kind of a mutual support that takes place. But suffering arises when, from the individual level, there's a misalignment with the evolution of the universe. When that happens, then the universe is evolving, but we're not evolving. So at first, it's like just a little bit of a discrepancy between where the universe is and where you are. So it's like, I can get along with that, I can live with that. But as the universe continues evolving, because it keeps going with or without us, pretty soon, you know, that discrepancy becomes more and more, and a tension builds up between where we are and where the rest of creation is. And at some point, there's like the tension is too much. The tension outweighs the amount of resistance that we're putting on our evolution. And there's kind of like a snapping. It's like it snaps, and we are snapped back into alignment with the rest of the universe. And when that type of snapping experience happens, it's usually coupled with the resistance Like the resistance is there, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there, and then snap. And there's this point where the resistance is still there, but we're already moving toward the goal, which is realignment with the rest of creation. And at that point, things can get really uncomfortable. Things can get really uncomfortable. Oh, look. Right when I said that, my camera went out of focus, but it came back. Good camera, I like you. Okay. Anyway, it's the resistance to the evolutionary flow that forms the seeds of suffering. Resistance to evolutionary flow forms the seeds of suffering. So letting go, applying Dharma, helps, because Dharma helps keep us aligned with the evolutionary process. All right. So I said there was this like a little story that I wanted to share with you. So it happened years ago when I was working very hard and very focused on being a mommy with little children, and also working in a workaday job that required a lot of hours on my part. And there wasn't a lot of time for Dorothy, but there was this underlying feeling in my world. There was this underlying, I want to call it a light, but it was a sort of softness, and it was a grace. It was like grace. There was an underlying grace in my world that supported my ability to feel confident that everything was going to work out. Because when I was working so hard and I had to be so focused on fulfilling the needs of other people, it was not clear how I was ultimately, as an individual, going to navigate through that experience. And there was no clear sign on the surface. And we were also, at the time, struggling very much financially. And there was no sign, like there was no clear way to know how we were going to actually get, sometimes from one day to the next. At one point, I went to a government office to find out about getting a loan. I heard that, poor families could get loans for houses. And I went to this government office and I talked to a nice lady. And she said, well, normally, we can give a pretty nice loan that you could buy a house with. But she said, your income's so low, you could triple it and you'd still be below poverty level. So you really can't get any loan at all because it's based on how much money you have. And I thought, well, I'm working close to 140 hours a week and I'm not making very much money. So, so how am I going to reconcile that one? But underlying it, there was this kind of grace, this clarity, this softness. It was this lovely, it was a kind of bliss. It really was a kind of bliss and a joy that somehow I knew that even though I wasn't getting paid a lot of money for my work, that I was being supported. I was getting support of nature. There was definitely a lot of support of nature, and that somehow we were going to navigate through this. I didn't know how, but somehow it was going to happen. So that feeling that I had has been with me for many decades, because now I have adult children and it's like decades and it's still here. It's still part of my world, right? And things have gotten absolutely better and easier and more wonderful and more comfortable. And so I realize that the comfort that we experience now is a byproduct of the surfacing of that particular light, that particular energy. So this is what I wanted to explore with all of you, because I realized, even back then, I realized sort of intuitively that light was some kind of special key. That's why I included it in today's webinar. It's a key. There's a key in there of, so I tried to analyze this light. And what I understood was that it is the light of pure potential that is rising to the surface of manifestation without hindrance, without boundaries, without being corrupted on the way out to the surface. So how do we leverage? Now, we've been talking about pure potential. How do we leverage that pure potential in a way that it makes its way completely out to the surface of creation, completely expressed at the relative level without becoming corrupted, without becoming damaged, without getting blocked on the way out to the surface? First, we have to look at the pure potential. And as I said, I know we've looked at pure potential some in our previous webinar, so I won't take too much time on it right now, but we do need to at least honor that. Pure potential. Pure potential is born in the gap between the unmanifest source of creation and the finest, the first, most abstract, most beautiful, delicate level of the manifesting process. It's right there. So pure potential, we could say, is the energy or the infinite resource of creative intelligence, the infinite resource of pure being in its first phase of manifestation. It is absolutely related to Agni. And if you're not sure about that word Agni, check out my knowledge base. But Agni, we could say, is the primordial light, or the first light of creation, that is kind of like a catalyst that awakens the entire manifesting process. Up till now, we've worked with pure potential, but in its very primordial form, in its most beginning form, is how we've worked with pure potential. But what we need to work with in this healing webinar is how that pure potential gets up to a much more concrete or much more expressed level. So I feel that our healing collective provided an important piece of knowledge or information for how this happened right at the beginning, right when we started. And that was that deep, luscious, amazing, profound, incredible dive into the silent source of creation. It took all of us, like we're like drill men on a rig or something up in the Alaskan waters, going in and drilling out the resources of the oil. Not that that's the best analogy or metaphor, because we don't want to actually exploit. We're not actually exploiting wholeness. We're actually nourishing wholeness when we dive in with our awareness, because our awareness is wholeness. But once we've done it together as a collective, and for those of you who aren't sure, you can always go back and review the moments of silence at the beginning of the session, because you'll get this recording. Once we've done that together, once we've experienced, we've been the deep sea divers, going into that deep, deep level of the potential of consciousness, then it's accessible to each one of us as individuals. It took our collective to get to that level of depth. But now we each as individuals own that level of depth. It's beautiful. This is incredibly powerful. It is incredible. It's incredible. Like, I'm just noticing it now and like amazed. I'm amazed. I'm bowing down to each person in this healing collective, because it's exciting to have this technology available to us now that it wasn't before. All right. So the potential, the pure potential, we start to notice it right at the junction between the unmanifest and the manifest. But the deeper the roots of that potential are penetrating into the field of the unmanifest, the more the potential has, the greater potential the pure potential has to manifest up to the surface without corruption. Okay. Okay, so the next question, and now at this point I'm off my notes and I'm just flying with you guys. So my next question is, what if we as a collective could dive deep, deep, deep into that silence to the point where we've reached the silence of being is infinite. It's a field of infinity that's beyond space and time. It's beyond all measures, all measures. But what if we as a collective could dive into it to the point where we reach some expression of resolution or completion? Like we dive as deeply as it is possible for us to dive as a collective, for example. Because fulfillment, I'm finding point number 3 of how we could define fulfillment. So we have 2 ways so far: supportive nature and not suffering. There's another way of defining fulfillment, and that is completion or resolution or wholeness, right? Whenever like you're doing something, I'm putting little curlers in my hair, and it takes a while, okay? It takes a while to put those little curlers in the hair. But there's this point where all the curlers have been completely put. There's this point where all the curlers have been put. And I bring my hands down and I'm like, okay, that's done. And it's fulfilling. It's like, okay, I completed that. And so I now, from here on, all I need to do is just reap the benefits. I get to enjoy the fruits of that action. So when we come to a point of completion, then from that point forward, we enjoy the fruits of the action. Applying this to the field of consciousness, what we see is that there are, we could say they're like guideposts, or there are points along the path of the development of consciousness where all of a sudden life gains a higher level of grace. It gains a deeper level of fulfillment. Everything in life becomes more fulfilling. Because when specific deep-rooted stresses are removed from the system, and they're really completely dissolved, when the seeds of karma, the seeds of stress are completely, totally removed, then that particular stress no longer factors into your experience. And that means henceforth, unless you create some new bad karma for yourself, which you probably won't, because anybody in their right mind wouldn't do that, right? That from that point forward, that particular stress is no longer a factor. That particular stress will no longer seed experiences at the surface of life. It will no longer give rise to people with difficult personalities that you have to deal with, or accidents, or whatever, or feelings like you don't have the resources you need to deal with problems or situations like that. So resolution or completion, resolution and completion. And I know that this point just surfaced because it's related to the previous point. They're coming out sequentially, always, right? So the previous point was that as a collective, we have this amazing, beautiful potential to dive more deeply into the fabrics of the silent source of creation than we do as individuals. And, oh yeah, and then I said, well, I wonder if there's a way we could dive in and we could come to a point of completion. And then the principle of completion rose up as one of the fundamental principles of fulfillment. So I feel compelled at this moment. And I know we're getting right up to our question time, and I see a few questions have come in. I got a few more questions over here too. So I don't want to take too long, but I think it would be really nice at this point in our process to take another, like say a minute, just a minute or 2 minutes of silence, and take another dive into the silence of being, because that's good stuff right there. And I won't time it super tightly. I'll just go on my intuition. And as we're diving into the silence of being, we're just very, very gently, very delicately considering completion, resolution, totality, wholeness, right? Fullness. All right, let's close our eyes. All right. Let's open our eyes slowly. Take at least a few seconds. We go slow because we don't want to jar the nervous system. The nervous system is getting so much benefit from this process. That includes the senses of perception. It includes all the regulating organs that control things like hormones and appetite and rest and bliss. The bliss is almost overwhelming, but not quite. We're holding on steady. That time we dived in, it was like infinite number of scintillating points of light everywhere, an infinite number. And it was just like points and points and points and points and points and points of light everywhere. And then I realized that a deep, deep integration was happening between our collective and that wholeness, that silence. So it was more like experiencing the dynamism that's in the source field and then going into, then it integrated, all that dynamism integrated, and it went into a deep, deep silence. And that silence was incredibly sophisticated. It was incredibly nourishing. It was incredibly supportive of our physiologies on many levels. I saw everybody in the session getting an upgrade, a physiological upgrade, nervous system, digestive system, endocrine system, musculoskeletal system. Did I say digestive system? Yes. Lymphatic system. The intelligence of your body that's responsible for refining the actual physical tissues of the body, that intelligence got a huge boost in that particular dive. And a lot of the same things that happened first time round happen again second time, like the increase of bliss and the refinement for the nervous system. But this time it was even more so. And also even more so was a tremendous deep integration, personal integration of individuality with the universal expression of that source field. And that's the abstract part. That's the abstract part. And that actually directly affects ego, sense of self. That the better the ego can understand itself in terms of unmanifest wholeness, and also in terms of the point of perception. So both of those, because that's really what ego is, right? It's the sense of self. So it's like me, that part of me where I'm like seeing this reality. It is that point of perception. It's the point of perception, is the ego. So the more the ego refines and connects to and integrates with that unmanifest wholeness of creation, the more power you directly draw from the source of creation into the level of experience. Whatever is happening, even in the worst of situations, you have greater access to your personal power. You have greater access to answers and creative solutions and the intelligence that puts you at the right place at the right time and allows you to connect with people so that you're working in a stable environment to deal with your challenges rather than working in an unstable environment where it seems like the environment's working against you, right? So it integrates, connects you, it connects you. Nice job. Okay, lots of questions coming in. I should get started here. There's my question box over there. Oh, so one beautiful, sweet woman is saying she's in California, at least she was. You were in like California last time I saw you. Complete benevolence without competition and raising each person more than they expect. Yes, because it's like we're so well organized. Oh, whoops. Thank you. We're so, one of the things that I realized that last time we took the silent dive is the first time we took the silent dive, there was this sort of organization that took place within our collective so that we were moving as a very, very orderly form, right? We were diving into that silence with, we had organized ourselves collectively to be an expression, or to, I would say, we'd organized ourselves to express totality as clearly and completely as we could from an energetic level. That means the feeling level, as the energetic level as completely as we could before we dived. The second time, I was just kind of thinking, well, you know, all of our talking and our working together here is sort of helping to organize us to do that again, only maybe more organized, but I didn't really notice that. So that tells me, right? You learn from everything. We learn from our successes, we learn from our failures, we learn from, not that it's necessarily a failure, because I think that second dive was really, really good and powerful and good for everyone, but I saw how we could do it better. I saw that we could organize ourselves in an even more orderly fashion. Oh, that's it. Remember I was saying, like, how can we do a dive that brings out that quality of resolution or completion? By establishing ourselves in a place of resolution and completion as a collective. And what that actually looks like, guys, is that looks like something that we have to, we have to define that for ourselves, what that looks like, because nobody has ever done it before. Like, we are literally doing this for the first time ever. So, oh wow, I just got a really big validation from creation. Woo. And sometimes that happens when we hit a good point right there. Yes. So what that means is that bringing together all the creative intelligence of each individual in this healing collective, we pool our resources as individuals to collectively identify how to produce the most perfect expression of unmanifest wholeness as a collective. And our collective is pretty big. I mean, we've got over 100 computers hooked up right now. We know that in many locations there are multiple people. So maybe we have 200. That's what I usually calculate. When we've got about 100 computers, that I'm calculating that we've got about 200 people together. You can kind of average. And what that looks like, what the 200 people looks like in, this is like where the art comes in, where we become artists. Like, how do we energetically organize ourselves so that we are so integrated, we are so coherent, we are so much in agreement. And I'm thinking, because I'm looking out at the field of everybody here, and I know that there's a lot of diversity in our group. I mean, there are, there are diversities across many spectrums of ways that we think about ourselves, our political positions and our gender identifications and our just everything. There's all these, differences. And yet I'm watching you guys do it. You're just doing it. And I'm describing. Looks like what's happening is, this is good. At the causal level of the physiology, as we know, there are regions of consciousness. And there is a region of consciousness, ancient, ever present, has been there already for so very long, but has not been accessed by collectives in ages. And if you think of like the pyramids, one of the things I read about the pyramids was that the purpose of making them like so that they would go up to a point is that no matter where you stand around the base of the pyramid, every single position around the base leads you to the same point of perspective at the top. So, right, so the ancients, they knew this, and they built the pyramids so that like there'd be a physical sign in our world so that we could see it and understand, try to understand for ourselves or recreate. But what they created wasn't just on the level of physical material. Nothing just about that creation either. That's quite a fabulous creation, but was also first on the level of consciousness. There is a location in the causal level of creation, a region, which we all share in common, that we can all find our way into that particular part of our own subtle field of consciousness, where we have the ability, it's like a kind of a pyramid-shaped region, if you will, that gives each person who's there the ability to focus to the same point, right? Like imagine if you're standing around the edge of a pyramid, right? And everybody's looking up and everybody sees the same point. Doesn't even matter if you're at the corner or you're in the middle, it doesn't matter because the point is, there's only one point from every single position around the edge. So much information is coming in there right now. Big downloads. We can decide, once we've found this region, once we feel comfortable, stable, finding our location around, I'm going to use the metaphor of the pyramid because it's working really well, around the edge of the pyramid, everybody's standing at some point in there. We can select what stands at the point. That's powerful, right? That's like really powerful. Thank you, by the way, my dear friend in California, for asking this amazing question. We're running out of time to actually exercise this tonight because there are a lot of questions that have just come in. So we're going to take this principle and we're going to really put it into practice tomorrow. And that gives all of you and me a chance to sleep on it and to explore this particular region of the causal field from dream state and sleep state, then everybody's going to be way more stable with it, right? Okay, good. And for those who are joining us tomorrow, for those who aren't, you will get the recordings, and you can do it with me when you get the recording. And all the recordings go out on. My husband works very hard to get those recordings out on Saturday, so we'll have them to you within 24 hours or less. Yeah. That's the organization. So we're talking about, just to define it in a nutshell, we're talking about a region of the causal field where all the laws of nature in that region, lively laws of nature, support a coordination of a collective. They support the coordination of our collective consciousness together so that we're super organized, so that we are organized to the point of resolution, right? Because that point on the pyramid is like a point of resolution. Okay, so that's all. It's very simple. It's actually pretty simple. You can do it. You can do it. And if you're not sure if you can do it or you're not sure, don't worry. We will do it some more. We will keep, this is like, we just found a key, you guys. We just like found something, this is huge. So, and that light, I don't know if anybody sent in the questions, but I understand another big storm is hitting the US, so we could use it to support that. There's a yes, thank you. In the second silence, every heartbeat is jetting out the fullness of being, spreading in all directions and flowing. Yes, 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 I found that. I noticed also beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Being spreading, yes. And she fixes her spelling on a few of those because she was so excited when she was typing. She was making typos. Another friend in California. Completion energy is felt in the core of the body. The bliss focuses into a cycle through chakras 3 and 4. Sometimes it's clear what the energy relates to. Sometimes, though, the waves of completion energy come repeatedly or alone, and I have no way of knowing what is completed. Is it grace? It's grace? Maybe it's grace. Or maybe she's saying it's grace. And I may guess at what is complete. And sometimes there's another wave, as if confirmation. I always say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience in the silence with us. That's so beautiful. And I think it's really important that we do that, that we do share our experiences. It even kind of encourages me to do, I've been playing with the idea of opening up a kind of more of a forum type live events like this, where we can share a little bit more details with each other, because the thing is that each person's experience shines an angle of light on the collective experience that helps everyone else's experience. So thank you for that beautiful experience. I really appreciate that you shared it. And especially bringing in chakras 3 and 4. That's interesting, because that's something that was less at the forefront of my awareness. And I'm thinking we might be able to dive into that more tomorrow as well. Thank you. This is amazing. You're amazing. This is deeply nourishing and good. Good capital letters. Thank you. So are you. And everyone should know that whatever you experience, whatever each of us experiences of this, is actually a reflection of our own inner reality. So when you experience that good, that's your good. That's you good. Thank you. Thank you for appreciating. Okay. The great physicist speaks. He says, is the ability to position our ego similar to empathy? Like we can feel what it's like to be a tree or another person or a star or a planet or anything else. Yes, because I would say yes. And of course, any question like this has many layers by which it can be answered. But I so appreciate it coming from such a profound mind and brilliant intellect. And so I answer at that level from where it is given, with all due respect and appreciation and gratitude, that if we think of ego as a spectrum from individual ego to universal ego, and we know that the nervous system does have this innate ability to navigate that spectrum and to stop at any point along that spectrum, then, so like at any moment, what we're experiencing, for example, let's just take an example, okay? Because this might make it more concrete for some people. Suppose you're having a nice experience. Maybe you're taking a shower in the morning and you're getting nice and clean, and it feels good to get nice and clean and wake up in the clean water in the morning, right? That's a simple experience, but it's beautiful. But suppose at the same time you're having that experience, which is going to draw awareness into the individual side of ego, right? Maybe at the same time you're having that experience, some collective events are occurring, like maybe a difficult election is coming up, and there's a certain amount of just natural tension in the collective field around you. So at an individual level, life is bliss, life is fine. I got hot water, I'm good, right? I mean, God's so grateful, right? In this day, what, 200 years ago, people didn't have hot water, people didn't bathe much, right? So, it's nice. We have these nice things, but then there's also the tension. So what happens is awareness is focused enough at the individual end to really value and appreciate the meaning and the importance of having the ability to control water temperature and wash off every day. And at the same time, the awareness has to be enough at the universal level of awareness that the tension in the environment is appreciated, it's seen in a broad perspective so that it does not overwhelm awareness, so that it is enjoyed as a kind of purification that's necessary to prepare our collective for an upcoming important event that will affect everyone's lives, right? So what happens is, instead of focusing just at the individual end of the spectrum of ego, or just at the universal end, we position ourselves somewhere in the middle where we can enjoy the nice shower, but we also have some perspective on that tension that's floating around through the collective field. And we're able to have a perspective that nurtures or nourishes that tension, that helps soften it, that helps it integrate back with its natural alignment with wholeness, right? Because you have to have enough wholeness, enough big perspective to help when your awareness is on something, that it activates that wholeness. So yes, it is like a kind of empathy, because when awareness goes into the bigger end of creation, one is able to, the nervous system is so flexible that awareness is able to travel on the threads of the astral body anywhere. You see a squirrel running, and there's a little thread of consciousness that runs from the awareness to the squirrel. And all of a sudden, it's like you are running. You are here sitting watching the running, but you are also the running, right? They're both. You're both. And then we're watching my son's dog right now, and the dog is also watching the running. So I'm watching the dog, watching the running. I'm watching the running, and I'm watching the dog running, and all of it is myself. All of it is understood as self, because at that point of ego, I am Dorothy, and I'm the dog, and I'm the squirrel running, and I'm the tree that the squirrel is running on, and I feel all of it as deeply and intimately as I feel my own physiology, and that is affected through, in part, by leveraging the potential of the astral level of the physiology. So that means awareness, go to the astral level and explore around in that area. You can do it in your sleep state. I want to get this next, even though we're over time, I absolutely am going to do one more question. And the reason is, this beautiful woman who's asking me a question has asked me before, and I love her so dearly. And I didn't get to answer her questions at a previous webinar, and I've kept intending, I'm going to do a video for you and answer your questions because they're important, and I'm still going to do it. It's just that my business keeps expanding so fast. I'm barely keeping up. I'm keeping up, but it's growing experience. Okay, she says she loved the second dive more and was more experiential and out of the head. All right, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your experience too. I am grateful. I love all of you. One lady says she loves it. It's like a symphony, and that it's so exciting. I am so grateful to all of you. You have no idea how amazing this is for me. It's amazing. It's amazing. Oh, thank you. Raising hands. I love you. So, yeah. And I see a few people have already signed out because on the East Coast, it's already like almost bedtime. So I don't want to keep everybody up past their bedtime too late, but I just want you all to know that I'm really looking forward to tomorrow's session. And we've got some exciting places that we've already set up tonight, some exciting places we're going to go tomorrow. So I will hopefully see a lot of you then. And those who I won't see live tomorrow, hopefully you will get the recording sometime by the end of Saturday, and you can join us virtually. All right, everybody, have a beautiful evening and see you tomorrow. Bye.